Hey guys, this is your host Thomas Tyree here from On the High Podcast. Today, this will be the Combat Series episode number 96 for you guys today. And to kick off this week's Combat Series episode, I'll be discussing the fight that took place last night in the main event of UFC 314 between Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes. This will be my fight summary for the fight. And last night we see a new chapter being written in the coveted featherweight division in the UFC, with Alexander Volkanovski reclaiming his throne as the king of the featherweight division once again, defeating Diego Lopes by unanimous decision in the main event of UFC 314 last night. So I'll be sharing my fight summary for you guys in this segment. Now, my thoughts on the fight. I really thought that Alexander Volkanovski swept Diego Lopes. What I mean by that is I scored the fight 5 rounds to 0 in favor of Alexander Volkanovski. And yes, Diego Lopes had his moments in this fight. But the reason why I scored the fight 5-0 in favor of Volk, I just feel like he finished every round cleanly. Other than that second round with 5 seconds to spare when Volk got dropped with the overhand right that Diego Lopes dropped him with. And he responded well to the adversity that he faced in the 4th round as well, where Diego Lopes hit him with I believe, an uppercut, and it blinded Alexander Volkanovski's vision, but he responded well, overcame adversity, and I think he had one hell of a fight last night. The game plan that Alexander Volkanovski had, a lot of people might have said he was running around the octagon, but he was sticking and moving around. Great footwork was displayed, moving around the octagon greatly. He led the fight with the jab, landed significant strikes. His MMA IQ was on full display. This is somebody that's been around the block, been around in the octagon with the best of the best, and took advantage against Diego Lopes, who was getting his first world title opportunity in his UFC career. The game plan as well, fighting in the distance, landing leg kicks, stunning him with a jab, and frustrating Diego Lopes, setting up traps for him, winning the counterpunching battle as well against a dangerous fighter, Diego Lopes, who has, I called it, lefty-righty explosive hands last week. But this fight was awesome. Great exchanges in the pocket as well. One hell of a fight. I definitely was entertained from start to finish for this 5-round featherweight championship fight. But in the end, it was Alexander Volkanovski that outsmarted, outlanded, and cleanly defeated Diego Lopes by unanimous decision last night in the main event of UFC 314. Now, I feel like Diego Lopes is here to stay. And he was riding a wave of momentum heading into this fight, but he fought well enough to honestly win. But the fact that he ran into a roadblock in Alexander Volkanovski, who was well more experienced, had a great game plan, and the more polished fighter, ended up walking out of Miami, Florida with that coveted featherweight title. So Diego Lopes is going to obviously be frustrated with himself, him and his team, because they didn't get the job done last night, but he still has a bright future at this featherweight division, and I do believe one day he will be a world champion. Last night in the main event of UFC 314 just was not his night, and he'll get there one day. But I'll go over the missed opportunities that I've seen from Diego Lopes, because, of course, last night I watched the fight, and then this morning I actually rewatched the fight to see what things stood out to me, having a second watch after watching the fight. So the missed opportunities that Diego Lopes had in this fight, mistake number 1, he probably wishes there was more than just 5 seconds left in that second round, because the money shot that he had on Volk with that overhand right hand that dropped and sent Alexander Volkanovski to the canvas. Unfortunately for Diego Lopes' sake, there was only 5 seconds left in the round, because if there was probably 30 to 35 seconds, he possibly could have finished off Alexander Volkanovski, but he was stunned and rocked by that shot. And we know that Volk's chin is very vulnerable at this particular point of his UFC career. Heading into that fight, he got knocked out in his 2 previous fights against Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria. So it was well documented that his chin was suspect, but it's unfortunate that didn't happen. And another mistake was Diego Lopes was not as aggressive as Alexander Volkanovski. And what I mean by that is, yes, he was the aggressor walking down Volk, but Volkanovski, the reason why I scored his shutout as well, the reason why I scored it a 5-0 shutout is because Alexander Volkanovski was busier. He was landing the much cleaner shots and leaving a bigger impact than what Diego Lopes was doing in the octagon. And I felt like Diego Lopes cannot make the key adjustments because Volk was having his way fighting in the distance. You got to figure out a way to close the gap, make the fight stay with you being in control, you walking down Volk and him not having, and cutting off the octagon with him not having much room to move around as swiftly as he was. People say he was running. I think he had a great game plan because Volk always fights well in the distance. If you go back and watch the tape of his fight, he always fights in the distance. Make sure he has enough space to land the leg kicks to the calf to slow down his opponents offensively, and has that stunning jab to keep his opponents off of him, make them second guess and to fall into the trap. To fall into his trap. That's exactly what happened to Diego Lopes last night. So I thought that was another mistake. And you could tell frustration was setting in by the fifth and final round. His corner and his team knew he needed a knockout or a finish in order to become the new featherweight champion. And obviously that didn't happen. So by round 5, the frustration set in for Diego Lopes. You could tell he was screaming at Alexander Volkanovski in frustration, telling him to come on, fight, him coming forward. But Volk already knew he had the fight in the bag. Why risk it? Why risk it at that particular point? And I think the fact that Diego Lopes knew that everything was coming to an end in terms of his aspirations for winning the title last night, frustration started to set in. He was getting frustrated, and honestly, he should have been more aggressive, more busier, and made the adjustments needed. But moving forward from that, Alexander Volkanovski at this particular point has proven me wrong, because last week I predicted with you guys that Diego Lopes would have his hand raised and he would be victorious winning that featherweight title. But Alexander Volkanovski is showing age is just a number. He's 36 years of age. He's now a 2-time featherweight champion, one of the greatest featherweights of all time, in the conversation for being one of the greatest featherweights of all time with Max Holloway and the all-time great of Jose Aldo. But Alexander Volkanovski has now won 7 title fights in his career, so he's a clutch performer and knows what it takes to get the job done. And I know how special Jose Aldo's featherweight title run was, with him defending the title 7 to 8 times over the years. But damn, Alexander Volkanovski definitely deserves his flowers, his credit. I will put him as the second best featherweight of all time behind Jose Aldo. But damn it, give this man Volk the credit that he deserves. And he's an all-time great. When he hangs it up, he's obviously got a spot in the UFC Hall of Fame. All-time great performance last night by Alexander Volkanovski against a gamed Diego Lopes. So with that being said, what's next for these two respective fighters moving forward? So I'll start with the champion. What's next for Alexander Volkanovski? When you look at it, it's interesting because Alexander Volkanovski is 36 years of age. He'll turn 37 in September, but he's already stated that he still wants to be an active featherweight champion. He wants to get back in the octagon as quickly as 3 months. Now, I think he needs time to heal. His eyes were pretty bruised and banged up, and did lose vision at some particular point in the 4th round where Diego Lopes stunned him with some combinations. So I think he's got to take time to heal, chill out, Volk. He'll get there, but I think he does need time to heal. I'll give him at least 4 to 6 months to heal. But I think the fight against Movsar should be next at the featherweight division. I mean, Movsar, he's 19-0 in his MMA career. Probably will be ranked in the top 3 in the featherweight division this upcoming week in the UFC. But I think that's a good fight. And the next big money fight to be made at the featherweight division with Alexander Volkanovski defending the title against a hungry challenger, and Movsar, who has yet to lose in the MMA career. He has a freestyle background, so I think right now Volk would have what it takes to remain champion, defeat Movsar. But I think that's still a fun fight, and I think that should be next in the featherweight division when Volkanovski is ready, he's prepared, and he's medically cleared to return to the octagon. Again, I think he needs more than 3 months to recover. That was a war that he went through with Diego Lopes. So take time to rest up, Volk, and I'd like to see that fight by the end of 2025. So what's next for Diego Lopes? Like I said, it's not the end of the world for Diego Lopes. He lost against an all-time great last night, Alexander Volkanovski. And he did show grit and determination in his first UFC title fight. Now, he has a bright future, but I think a big fight for Diego Lopes will be against Yair Rodriguez. Yair Rodriguez was successful on this card last night as well. So I can see these two respective featherweights fighting each other next, with the winner between Diego Lopes and Yair Rodriguez fighting for a title opportunity at some point in 2026. So both went back and forth. Diego Lopes and Yair Rodriguez went back and forth with each other during the UFC 314 press conference a few days before the UFC 314 pay-per-view. They exchanged some words, so you know the bad blood is already brewing between these two featherweights. Why not get them in an octagon with a chance to earn a featherweight title opportunity down the line? So I think that would be a fun fight. Styles makes fights, but that's how I book Volkanovski and Lopez moving forward in this featherweight division. But that is my fight prediction, or my fight summary between Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes.